Rejected by her harsh, noble father for being too heavy to wed, Olivia was handed over as a slave as punishment. What was intended to dishonor her became the first experience of genuine affection. Olivia hit the cold stone floor with force, her elbows raw and her knees aching. The heavy oak doors shut behind her with a finality that echoed like thunder in her chest. She hurried to sit up, her long dress wrinkled and covered in dust, her curls clinging to her damp cheeks. The guards outside did not spare her a single glance. The punishment was complete. Their role was finished. Inside the hall, Lord Carson's voice still reverberated in her mind. "You disgrace this family. Let him have you. Perhaps some weeks of humiliation will teach you to eat and behave properly." That was all. No more debate, no tears could move him, no begging could change his mind. Olivia was no longer the noble daughter of Vailmont's most influential merchant. She had become property, handed over like something worthless and broken. Her eyes stung as she looked up at the man standing before her. He was barefoot, his hands and shirt covered in dirt. His shirt barely hung from his shoulders, torn and worn. The cuffs of his pants were rough and frayed. A long scar ran down his forearm, visible even in the dim light of the servant quarters. Yet his eyes were not cruel or mocking. They were surprised. He was shocked. He looked at her as if he could not decide whether to assist her or to kneel. She faintly recalled his name was Caleb, a stable hand who had been enslaved after being purchased from the mountains during a famine that forced the poorest families to trade their children for food. She had seen him only twice before, once when she was a child watching from a carriage, and again just last week when her father had shouted at him to shovel manure faster. Now somehow he was supposed to be her guardian. "You do not need to kneel," she said, her voice trembling more than she wanted. "They made it sound like I belong to you now." He blinked slowly, as if her words took a moment to sink in. Then, with a slight furrow in his brow, he stepped forward. Not close enough to intimidate her, but near enough that she could scent the hay on his skin and the warm earth in his breath. "I do not want to be a gift," he finally said, his voice quiet and uncertain. "I never asked for this." "Neither did I." They stood silently, watching each other as if the ground might shift beneath them. Then Olivia's stomach growled loudly. Mortified, she pressed a hand against it, but Caleb only turned toward the small fire in the corner. Without a word, he grabbed a tin pot and filled it with water. "I will make broth," he said. She stared at him, confused. "You are not going to hurt me?" He paused and then glanced over his shoulder. "Do you really think I am like your father?" That stopped her from speaking. She lowered her eyes. Nobody had ever spoken about Lord Carson in such a way. Not aloud, not in front of anyone. Her voice was quiet, but held no fear, only a sincere sadness, as if he had witnessed too many men like her father, and understood that the harshest punishments were often hidden behind titles and wealth. When the broth was ready, he handed her the warm cup, and her hands trembled as she took it. Olivia remained silent while drinking, uncertain if she could speak without bursting into tears, and he asked no questions. Instead, he quietly cleaned his tools by the firelight, softly humming a tune she did not recognize. That night he offered her the cot, and laid a blanket beside the hearth for himself. It was the first gentle act she had experienced in many months. The following morning, Olivia awoke to the sound of birdsong and a stiff neck. She rose too quickly, regretting it at once. Her back ached, her feet were swollen, and her gown still held a faint scent of tears. Caleb was not in the room. Panic stirred. Had he informed someone? Had he reconsidered? Would the guards come and drag her back to the cold stone prison that was her home? Yet no, the door creaked open shortly after, and Caleb appeared with arms full of firewood, his face glistening with morning sweat. "You are awake," he stated simply. She nodded, brushing strands of hair away from her face. "I never thanked you for last night." He said, "There's no need." Yet something in his tone quietly pained, made her wish she could repay his kindness. He laid out fresh bread and salted plums, then, to her surprise, took a seat opposite her, as if they were equals. Olivia blinked in disbelief. "You are not afraid I will report you for sitting here?" He gave a faint smirk and replied, "You are not. No longer noble. That should have stung, but it did not. Not when he spoke that way." Later, she offered to help clean the barn. He stared at her in disbelief. "You, yes, me," she responded, rolling up her sleeves. "I do have hands, do I not?" She was awkward, without a doubt. She stumbled over hay bales, screamed when a mouse darted by, and once swung the broom so forcefully it struck the wall and broke. Caleb tried to suppress his laughter, but he failed completely, and the sound of his chuckle was warm, like thunder shining through daylight. That night, as they sat by the fire once more, Olivia asked the question that had been troubling her all day. "Why have you never asked me anything?" He glanced over, brow creased. "Like what? Like what I did to end up given away, or what he said to you, or why I appear the way I do?" Caleb reclined, stretching his long arms behind his neck. "I do not care what he told me, and I have noticed the way you look. There is nothing wrong with it." She laughed, bitter and brief. "You are the only one who thinks so. I doubt that, but I have no interest in others." For a moment the atmosphere between them was delicate, heavy with something unspoken. "You are kind," she murmured. "Being kind is dangerous." "Not as dangerous as being cruel," he answered. 2 days slipped by, then 3. By the 4th, the entire estate was abuzz. Rumors drifted like fog. Some claimed Lord Carson was holding a feast for foreign aristocrats. Others whispered that he planned to wed off his youngest daughter next, and Olivia had been removed to make room for the new partner, but Olivia did not mind. She helped with market stalls, carried buckets of water, and learned how to knead dough. Caleb never once acted as if she did not belong. One afternoon, as she was dragging a bucket across the yard, she heard a whistle. A voice shouted, "Looks like the pigs escaped again." Olivia froze. 3 servant boys leaned against the stables, laughing. "She even waddles like one," they jeered. Before she could turn, Caleb was already there. He did not yell or hit them. He only gazed at them intently. "Say that again," he said steadily. The boys fell silent. "I said," Caleb repeated, "say it again." None of them spoke, and they scattered like leaves in the wind. Then he looked at her slowly. "Do not listen to them," he said softly. But her hands were trembling already. The bucket slipped from her grasp, spilling water everywhere. Stepping back, she said, "I need a moment," and ran away. She did not stop until she reached the barn, hiding behind the hay bales and crying quietly. Caleb found her after a few minutes, but said nothing. He simply sat beside her and waited. When her tears began to subside, she whispered, "You cannot protect me from all of them." "No," he admitted, "but I can protect you from believing their words." That night he prepared dinner for her. He hummed again, and this time she hummed along. By the end of the week, she noticed something different. The way he looked at her when she laughed, how he always walked on the outer side of the path to keep her nearer to the hedges, and how he would recall how Olivia preferred her bread toasted just right, or her tea sweetened with honey, and her own heart, how it raced now whenever he spoke to her. She had been given to him as a form of punishment, yet it no longer felt like one. It felt secure, complete. It seemed as if she was starting to become someone she did not despise, someone deserving of affection, even if the true meaning of that was still beyond her grasp. Not fully, but she was about to learn, because the world was ready to challenge them both. This ordeal would begin at daybreak when a letter arrived that would change everything. The letter was sealed with wax of a deep red shade, resembling blood. A rider appeared just as the sun rose, galloping swiftly along the eastern road, his horse frothing at the mouth, its breath like smoke in the chilly morning air. Caleb had encountered messengers before, always stiff-backed and cold-eyed men who carried grim news for someone. But this one was not destined for the master of the house. No, this one called out for Caleb by name, and that was enough to draw attention. He met the rider outside the barn while Olivia remained inside, kneading dough with flour dusting her arms. She did not hear the sharp exchange between them, nor did she notice the messenger thrusting the letter into Caleb's hands before riding away without a second glance. But she saw Caleb's expression when he returned. It was pale and empty. "I will leave by noon," he said calmly, placing the letter down as if it were incredibly heavy. "I must journey to the mountain provinces." "What?" Her hands still trembled, forgotten. "Why?" He hesitated briefly and then handed her the letter herself. She turned the letter over in her hands before unfolding it. The handwriting was graceful, precise as well. "Caleb of Orond, your mother is dying. If you want to see her one last time, come without delay. You have never truly been forgotten, but if you wait too long, all that will remain is regret. Ezra." She read the message twice, then a third time, the words beginning to blur. "You never mentioned you had family," she murmured softly. "There wasn't much to say," he answered quietly, already gathering his bag. "My father passed during the famine. My mother, she lasted longer than I imagined. Ezra was her brother, my uncle. How long has it been since you spoke to them?" "7 years," he admitted, glancing at her, "since the day I was sold." Silence filled the room. Olivia stood motionless, her hands still sticky from flowers, heart pounding with an emotion she could not name. Fear, loss, or something even deeper. Something like being abandoned before anything truly began. "You're coming back, right?" That question made him hesitate. He studied her face intently, and then gave a single nod. "Yes." But even as he said it, she could detect the doubt in his eyes. The rest of the morning passed quietly as Olivia helped him pack. He owned very little: a worn volume, a spare pair of boots, a carving knife, and a wooden comb. When he wasn't watching, she slipped a small jar of honey into his bag. "I'm not sure you'll find this where you're headed," she said, pretending to sweep the floor. He smiled gratefully. They walked side by side to the estate's boundary, where the old path curved downwards. The valley was already bathed in sunlight that began piercing through the morning fog. He seemed somehow taller today. Or perhaps it was simply that she was seeing him with new clarity, every line of pain, hope, and the burden of memories etched deeply into his face. "Take this," she said as she pressed something into his palm. It was a button from the sleeve of her old dress, the very one she wore the night her father cast her aside. It held no great worth, but it was hers. "I will sew it back on when you return," she whispered. He slowly curled his fingers around it, then suddenly leaned in to kiss her forehead gently, with reverence. "I will come back," he promised, "no matter what I find there." And then he disappeared. 3 weeks slipped by. There were no letters, no news. Olivia tried to keep herself occupied. She cleaned the stalls, fed the hens, and taught herself how to mend the tears in her apron. Yet each night, when she curled up on the small bed by the fire, her hand would instinctively reach for the empty spot on her sleeve, where the button once was. It was during the 4th week that everything shifted. She had just finished feeding the lambs when 2 men arrived on horseback. They bore the green crest of House Valemont, her father's family, and their faces were grim. "Lady Olivia," one of them said formally, "Lord Carson requests your presence immediately." She stared, then said sharply, "No, I am no longer his daughter." He had been clear about that. "You misunderstand," the second guard replied. "He is dying." She blinked in disbelief. He was thrown from his horse last week and suffered internal bleeding. The healers say he has less than 1 day to live. He asked for you." Olivia stood motionless. She expected to feel nothing, or maybe a sense of vindication, but instead her stomach felt heavy and cold because no matter what he had done, he was still her father, and he was dying. The estate was just as she remembered, vast, cold, and devoid of any warmth. Yet the guards let her pass without objection. Servants watched as she went by, some with pity, others with confusion. No one tried to stop her. She found him in the master chamber. He looked pale, propped up on silk pillows, barely breathing. When his eyes opened and met hers, tears welled up. "Olivia," he whispered hoarsely, "you came." She hesitated, not moving closer just yet. "You summoned me," he continued, wincing. "I was wrong about everything." She stayed silent, waiting. "I thought if I punished you, I could fix you. But there was nothing broken, was there?" Olivia's hands shook. "No, there was not." He turned away, ashamed. "I sent you to that boy as a lesson, but now I see he was the only one who truly deserved you." Her heart ached. She moved closer and sat beside the bed. "I forgive you," she whispered. "Not for your sake, but mine." His breathing slowed. "Tell him thank you," he murmured. Caleb gave a subtle nod. Then with one last breath, Lord Carson closed his eyes. The funeral was magnificent, extravagant, and costly. Olivia did not shed a tear. That night she returned to the barn, alone once again. And when she opened the door and gasped when she saw him, Caleb standing by the fire, covered in snow. She didn't move gently or silently. Instead, she ran and immediately threw herself into his arms. He caught her without hesitation and held her close. They remained silent for a long moment before she pulled away, her eyes sparkling. "I thought you weren't coming back." He answered with a calm smile. "I said I would. I always keep my promises." "What happened?" she asked. His smile softened as he looked down at her. "My mother passed before I arrived, but I buried her near the old pine tree. Ezra gave me her journal. She never stopped praying for me." He gently touched her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "She wrote about you, Olivia. She whispered your name often. She imagined the girl I would love someday, saying she would be courageous, kind-hearted, and strong. That I would know her because she stood up to cruelty without losing her gentleness." Her eyes welled with tears. "I missed you," she murmured. "I missed you even more," he replied. Taking her hand, he pulled a small object from his satchel. It was a button he placed inside her palm, saying, "It's time to sew it back on." She laughed through her tears. She had never stopped hoping, but fate had one more surprise awaiting them. That very night, a letter came, not from a friend or family member, but from a noble house 2 counties away. Addressed to Lady Olivia of Valemont, the letter stated they were writing to inform her of her late father's debt to their family. As his only heir, she was now responsible for the payment. Failure to pay would force them to collect by other means. The candle flickered as the truth sank in. The letter trembled in Olivia's hand as she read it once more, then yet again. The words blurred repeatedly until she finally blinked sharply, her heart beating so loudly she could barely hear Caleb's voice asking what was wrong. She gave him the paper. He read it silently, his lips pressed into a firm line, his shoulders stiffening with every sentence. "A debt," she whispered. "What debt?" He had never mentioned anything like this before. Caleb looked up, his gaze steady but his voice strained. "It says your father owed them. That makes it real. Nobles do not care if you were aware or not. All they demand is what is owed, or blood as a replacement." She sank onto the stool, her legs trembling and too weak to hold her up. "How much do they want?" He held the letter up to the candlelight again, scanning the fine print at the bottom. 2,000 in gold. The sum hung between them like a heavy stone sinking in deep water. Olivia's throat tightened with dryness. That cannot be, Caleb finished her thought softly. For most people, especially for us. Caleb folded the letter with calm precision, putting on a mask of composure, but Olivia noticed the strain in his jaw and the tension in his shoulders. His calm was an act. He was calculating. Then we run, she decided. We gather what we need and leave before they arrive. Caleb did not move. No, he answered quietly. Running only forces us to pray. They will catch us eventually, and the farther we go, the worse it will be when they do. Olivia stood once more, trembling. Then what do we do? Caleb stared into the fire, his hands clenching. We buy time. 3 days later, the collectors arrived. 2 men in black coats surrounded a woman dressed in red. Their horses were energetic, their boots shining, and their eyes fixed on the barn as if it were something to be examined and recorded, not a place where someone could actually live. The woman was the first to approach. "I am Lady Kaya Thorne," she declared without a hint of warmth. "I act on behalf of House Briarhelm, to whom your father owed a considerable debt. We have come to retrieve what is owed." Olivia stepped forward. Caleb stayed just behind her, silent but unwavering like a fortress. "I received your letter," Olivia stated calmly. "We do not have the kind of money you demand." Lady Kaya raised one eyebrow. "Then perhaps you should start considering more inventive solutions. Your father left collateral before his passing, mainly land deeds and titles. Yet his ultimate pledge was sealed with something even more precious." Olivia's throat tightened. "What exactly do you mean?" Lady Kaya's gaze swept over her slowly with a chilling precision. Then Caleb moved forward, his eyes burning with anger. "She is not for sale." Lady Kaya's face remained impassive. "That decision is not yours to make. By law, she is the sole remaining heir, which means the debt now belongs to her. The conditions are non-negotiable. We offer her a choice: pay, serve, or give up." Olivia's heart thundered loud in her ears at the word serve. Lady Kaya's lips curled slightly. "You will live on our estate, perform duties, cook, clean, maybe even host events for a period of 10 years, at the end of which the debt will be cleared." Caleb responded with a bitter laugh. "And how many last those 10 years?" The woman gave no reply. They allowed only 2 days to make this life-altering decision. Just 2. Olivia could not accept that. At night she could not calm herself. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, and her mind kept returning to the same painful thought that her father had betrayed her once before. Now, in his death, he had done so again. This time, however, there was no noble family backing her name, no riches or influence, only herself and the man by her side. Caleb wandered through the barn past midnight, his boots softly scraping the worn wooden floorboards. He glanced toward her bed and saw her curled beneath the aged quilt. Believing she was asleep, he finally spoke, as if answering a question she had asked silently. "I can't let them take you." Her eyes fluttered open. "And if I go willingly?" she said. "You will not," he answered firmly. "You said we could not run, but we will find another path." "What path?" Her voice rose in desperation. "We have nothing, Caleb." "You have a name that once held power in the outer provinces," he insisted. "And I have this barn, a few hens, and an apron full of holes." He closed the distance between them with 2 quick steps. "You have me." His voice was more intense than she had expected. "You have me, Olivia, and I will stand between you and anyone who comes after you." She blinked sharply, then whispered, "Even if they kill you for it?" He did not hesitate. "I would rather die standing than live without you." The following morning, Olivia wrote a letter herself. With trembling fingers, she folded it carefully and sealed it with wax, pressing the stamp firmly using the back of a spoon. Then she gave it to Caleb. "I want you to deliver this to the outpost near the trade route," she instructed. "Give it to the courier and tell him it is for Lady Rosund of Hillville." Caleb frowned. "Who is she?" "My aunt," Olivia replied. "Years ago, she had distanced herself completely from my father, but if she is still alive, she could provide assistance." He glanced down once more at the letter. "What did you say to Olivia?" his voice asking quietly. Her jaw quivered as she admitted the whole truth. He gave a slow nod and said, "I will depart this very night." That evening, Scylla journeyed beneath a bright full moon. The road was silent dust swirling behind his horse in long silver streams. He arrived at the outpost before the first light. The courier assured him the letter would be delivered within 7 days. Yet, upon Caleb's return to the barn, Olivia had vanished. There was no message, no indication of a struggle, only her unoccupied bed, the neatly folded quilt, and a faint scent of rosemary lingering on the pillow. Caleb stood frozen in the doorway, his heart sinking. He examined the floor and spotted tracks, a wagon no older than 2 hours. Without hesitation, he mounted his horse again and followed the prince eastward into the forest. There, near a stream, he found them. Lady Kalia with her men, and Olivia sitting rigid in the back of the carriage, her wrists tightly bound. She did not notice him at first, but he saw her and raised his axe silently. They remained unaware until he was dangerously close. The first guard turned just in time to glimpse the blade descending. Caleb struck true without missing. The second guard reached for his pistol, but Caleb was swifter. He lunged from the side and knocked him unconscious with a hard headbutt, then stood up bleeding yet undefeated. Lady Kalia stepped back, a look of horror painting her perfect face. "You fool," she said. "She agreed to come." Caleb wiped the blood from his temple and replied, "She never agreed to the chains." Advancing, he declared, "You will not keep her. Go back to your master," he said, his voice rough like gravel, "and tell him the debt died with Lord Carson. If you attempt to collect it again, I will bury the entire family myself." Olivia stared at him, then at Kaya, and without saying another word, she turned and ran. Caleb cut her bonds. Her wrists were bruised. She looked up at him, filled with shame. "I believed I could end it. I thought surrendering to you would keep you safe." He cupped her face with both hands. "You are not mine to give away, but I would rather die than let anyone take you." She collapsed and clung to him, and this time he embraced her without hesitation. 2 days passed, then 4, then a whole week. Just as their anxiety began to resurface, a letter arrived. This time it was written on parchment soft as velvet, sealed with silver wax. The letter was addressed to Lady Olivia of Valemont, from Lady Rosund of Hillville. "My beloved niece, I have waited many years for this day. From the moment your father expelled you, I promised that if you ever called, I would come. My carriage will reach you within the next fortnight. Do not act, rest, prepare yourself. You are no longer alone, and you never will be." Olivia read the message aloud 3 times. Then she met Caleb's gaze, and for the first time in weeks, perhaps years, she smiled without fear. Yet even as hope blossomed within her, a cold shiver ran down her spine. In the shadows of the hills, a figure watched them. It was not Lady Kaya. It was a man clad in white, and he was smiling. The man in white leaned against the weathered fence post just beyond the wild grasses, his coat impeccable and his boots spotless. He carried no weapon and smiled with a calmness that made Caleb's skin crawl. That was the strange thing about him. He appeared too pure, too untouched, as if dirt refused to cling to his clothes. Olivia did not notice him at first because she was busy brushing the mare outside the barn with her letter from Lady Rosamond neatly folded in her apron. She hummed softly, a sound unusual for her, something gentle born from hope. It had been several days since she dared make any noise at all. When she finally looked up, her hands froze mid-motion. The currycomb slipped and fell to the ground. "Caleb," she whispered, but her voice was barely audible. The man in white slowly raised one hand, palm facing outward. His smile did not reach his eyes, and he did not blink. "Good afternoon, miss." Caleb stepped out of the barn at the same moment, straw stuck to his sleeves. He spotted the man immediately, and Olivia did not need to explain. Caleb's voice lowered like rolling thunder. "Turn around and go back the way you came." The man stayed still. "You are the one who took out Briarhelm's collectors," he said, his voice light and pleasant. "That took some courage, I'll admit. I have seen many give up by now. You did not." Caleb moved forward slowly, closing the space between them. His axe was not in his hands, but his steady and balanced movement warned of what would come if he was pushed. "I said walk away." The man chuckled once, slowly. "Oh, I'm not with Briarhelm anymore. Not officially, at least. You could say I handle overflow. They do not like to get—" Their hands were not clean. Caleb's gaze sharpened. "Then go and tell them the debt was false, and they will never possess her." "Oh, I trust you," the man replied calmly, still smiling. "But I believe you misunderstand the nature of this matter." He slowly reached into his coat and pulled out a small black card. Upon it was a seal Olivia did not recognize, two ravens circling an iron gate. He did not hand it to her, but let it flutter in the wind and settle at her feet. "You were never the debt, Lady Olivia," he murmured. "You were the stake." Olivia's breath caught in her throat as Caleb stepped closer, nearly face to face with the stranger. "She was the wager in a game," the man growled. His grin broadened, fierce and desperate. "Lord Carson lost much in his final years: possessions, influence, reputation. Yet even in his downfall, he found cunning ways to place one final bet. You, Olivia." Her knees wobbled, but she remained standing. The man bowed mockingly. "You are valuable now, my lady, not for who you are, but for who desires you." Caleb took a single step forward without hesitation. The man did not recoil. "Tell your master," Caleb said in a low voice. "He can come for her himself." The man smiled wider. "He will." Then he turned and disappeared into the grass, his coat fluttering, boots silent. They watched until the white of him vanished among the yellow stalks. For a long time after, neither spoke. That night, Olivia could not find sleep. The barn was warm and the wind gentle, yet the tension in her chest refused to settle. She lay staring at the ceiling as stars slowly drifted through the gaps in the beams. She had nearly convinced herself that it was finished, that they had emerged victorious. Yet this was a challenge her father had set in motion, long ago a puzzle she never fully grasped. Now she found herself merely a pawn on a board no one had ever laid out for her. Nearby, Silo was seated, sharpening his axe. Each scrape against the stone resonated like a heartbeat, steady, repeating, oddly reassuring. "Do you really believe he will come?" she whispered. Caleb did not hesitate. "He is already somewhere nearby. Men like him send others first to announce the coming storm. Then they await the lightning." Olivia closed her eyes. "I am not worthy." The axe halted mid-motion. When she opened her eyes again, she felt the atmosphere had changed. Caleb's gaze was fixed on her. "Do not ever say that again." His tone was calm yet firm, with steel beneath. "I have seen the world bend men like your father. I have watched them treat love as a mere coin, a daughter as an asset. But what they cast aside is where God begins his work, not theirs." Tears stung behind her eyelids. "Then why does it still hurt?" He gently placed the axe down and came over to kneel beside her bed. Because love demands a price, he murmured, even when it is genuine, perhaps especially then. She turned toward him as tears streamed freely. He did not kiss her. Instead, he simply held her hand, and for the first time, she did not feel shattered, but steady and supported. 3 days slipped by without any trace of the man in white or any other visitor. Then Lady Rosalind appeared. The carriage was modest but polished and elegant. Graceful in its simplicity, pulled by a pair of white horses, Rosamond herself emerged. She was not dressed in a flowing gown, but wore tough riding leathers. Her hair flashed with strands of silver, her posture as rigid as a blade, and her presence commanded the entire barnyard before she spoke a word. She glanced at Olivia once, then opened her arms wide. The embrace was nothing like Olivia had imagined. It was fierce and urgent, as though Rosamond was trying to cram all the lost years into a single instant. "My poor girl," Rosamond murmured into her hair. "I regret not coming sooner. I should have been here the moment you were born." Olivia sobbed openly in her arms. Caleb stayed back uncertainly until Rosamond turned to study him carefully. "You are the one who saved her," she said. Caleb shifted his weight nervously and replied, "I simply refused to let them take her." Rosamond's expression softened. "That is more than most men would ever do." That evening they ate beneath the stars. Rosamond told tales of the northern province where she lived, a quiet and distant land away from the court, a place where old laws barely reached. A refuge. Olivia listened eagerly, her heart slowly healing with every story, every promise of safety. Yet she noticed Caleb was not eating. He was watching the forest intently. "Something is wrong," he whispered after the meal, his voice low so only she could hear. "What is it?" she asked. He stood silently, tense. Rosamond rose swiftly, alert instantly. Then they heard it, the terrified neigh of horses. They ran to the forest's edge. The carriage was engulfed in flames, both horses missing. A body lay collapsed in the dirt, one of Rosamond's guards. Olivia stood frozen. Caleb moved without hesitation, pulling the guard away from the flames, but it was already too late. Smoke billowed into the night air, suffocating the stars. Rosamond's expression hardened as she said breathlessly, "They anticipated us. They were watching." Silas examined the blood on his hands. This was Briar Helm. This was cleaner, quicker. Rosamond gave a single nod. "I know who they are." Olivia stepped forward, and Rosamond fixed her gaze on her without blinking. The House of Holland. The name meant nothing to Olivia, but Caleb muttered under his breath. Rosamond went on. "Your father's fiercest adversary. He destroyed them publicly in court over a dispute about inheritance lines. He forced them into submission. That card, the one bearing the ravens." Olivia nodded. "That's their symbol. They have been biding their time to make him suffer, and now they intend to do it through you." Caleb's voice grew fierce. "Then we eliminate them first." Yet Rosamond suddenly appeared exhausted. "They do not fight fair or clean. They send men like that one in white hunters and tacticians. They will wear you down long before you ever confront their leader." Olivia glanced between them. "Then what is our move?" Rosamond's answer came quietly. "We make you vanish." The strategy was straightforward. Rosamond would journey north, serving as bait, leaving clear signs behind Olivia, and Caleb would take an alternate route through the ancient riverbeds, now dry but still passable, without horses or carriages, just on foot. Once they crossed the final hill, they would become ghosts. The plan nearly succeeded, but right before, at nightfall, Olivia heard a noise coming from the rocks ahead. It was not the wind nor water, but a faint whisper. When Caleb turned to listen, the ground suddenly gave way beneath them both. Olivia screamed as the earth split open. Caleb grabbed her arm and tried to drag her back, but the old path betrayed them. Sand cascaded down in a landslide, and they plunged into darkness. Rocks and dust engulfed them completely. They hit the ground hard. Caleb groaned while Olivia remained still. Above, a figure appeared on the edge of the pit. A white coat shimmered as he looked down with a sly smile like a fox watching its prey trapped below. "Well," the man said calmly, "I do enjoy it when things get exciting." The light filtering through the dust was dim, casting a golden haze. Olivia's ribs ached with every breath. Something near her right shoulder burned sharply. She couldn't move. Caleb groaned beside her, half buried under fallen stones and brittle twigs. He quickly brushed debris from his chest and crawled toward her, without checking his own wounds first. "Olivia," he gasped, "are you—" "I can't move," she replied, her voice strained. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, although she flinched in pain. "You're hurt, but not broken. That's good. Thank goodness." Above them, the man in white stood motionless at the ravine's edge, hands folded behind his back. "Don't worry," he called out, his voice clear and echoing. "It's not deep enough to be fatal. That wouldn't make for much of an ending, would it?" Caleb's anger surged as he struggled to rise. A feeling in his chest, like smoke drifting through dry twigs, surged within him. "I will climb up there," he shouted, "and show you what a real ending looks like." The man only grinned more broadly. "I know you will. That is exactly why I brought some company." He stepped aside, revealing two more men standing at the edge. They were sturdy and rough, but dressed in black. These were not Briar Helm's goons. They were skilled and methodical. One carried a rifle, while the other slowly lowered a lantern into the ravine, suspended by a rope. "We will not shoot," the man in white said softly. "Not just yet. The Hollands have no desire for bloodshed, at least not if you return the wager willingly. You have indeed earned your medal. But the girl now belongs to them." Caleb's hand clenched tightly. "She does not belong to anyone." Above them, the man in white shrugged. "Suit yourself." Then he turned and disappeared from the ledge, his voice fading away like a phantom's whisper. The two black-clad men stayed behind, watching and waiting. Caleb turned to Olivia. Her complexion was pale, yet her eyes remained sharp and determined. "We need to move," she said through clenched teeth. "I can carry you," he said as he knelt beside her. "No," she grabbed his sleeve firmly. "They want us to hurry. That is their error. We will wait until they lose patience." Caleb glanced back at the top. The men had not moved. He nodded slowly. "All right, then. We wait." Night descended. The stars filled the sky. Still, the men above neither left nor made a move. Olivia leaned against a broken slab of stone, the pain easing slightly with the darkness. Caleb had ground herbs between stones and pressed them firmly onto her shoulder. He sat quietly beside her, a knife in hand, carving marks into the wall. "What are you doing?" she inquired. "Counting," he murmured. "Days." "No, reasons," she replied, turning toward him with confusion. "Reasons for what?" He did not meet her gaze to survive. Olivia remained silent for a brief moment, then asked, "How many, so far?" She glanced at the wall where the tally reached 22. She swallowed hard and said, "And me?" He hesitated. "You are at least 15 of those." They fell silent again, lost in their thoughts. By dawn, the watchers had vanished, yet they left something behind. A rope ladder dangled halfway down into the ravine. It was clearly a trap, but it presented an opportunity. Silas tested the rope gently and found it secure. "I will climb first," he assured her. "Then I will pull you up. No mistakes." She agreed without hesitation. As his boots reached the midpoint, Olivia sensed something unusual. "There is movement," she whispered. "Not above, but below." When she looked back, figures emerged from the darkness, 3 women. They were not soldiers, but ragged, filthy, and bone-thin, trembling like autumn leaves in a storm. They stared at Olivia as if she were a ghost. One of them whispered, "You are the one." Olivia pressed herself against the wall in shock. "What?" Another stepped forward, her unevenly shorn hair and soot-smudged face revealing hardship. "You are Lord Carson's daughter, the one everyone wanted but could never sell." Caleb froze on the ladder. Olivia gasped. "How do you know that?" The woman's eyes filled with tears as she looked up at her. "Because we were the ones they sold instead." The ancient cavern spread far beyond the pit, reaching depths neither of them had expected. Beneath the ravine lay old tunnels long forgotten, once used for mining and now repurposed for even darker purposes. The women guided them through these passages, their lanterns casting flickering light on stone walls shaped by hands long gone. There were others here, at least a dozen, all women and all silent, until Olivia arrived. Then they started to speak, not to her, but about her. She was the one her father refused to reveal. She was the gamble promised to the victor, the prize. Olivia collapsed to her knees, whispering, "No, I didn't know. I swear I didn't." "We believe you," the first woman said softly. "You were just a piece to them like the rest of us." Caleb stood nearby, fists clenched, asking, "How long have you been here?" The woman remained silent, only raising one arm to display a brand on her wrist, a circle of ravens. "The House of Holland keeps their promises," she said bitterly, "even the cruel ones." That night, Caleb stayed close to Olivia. The caverns were cold but dry, offering a strange kind of safety, unlike the outside world that had been harsh for days. Olivia lay awake, listening to the breathing of the others, wondering how many had been children when taken, and how many were still waiting to be rescued. Caleb touched her shoulder gently. She flinched. "Sorry," he murmured. "I'm fine." "No, you are not." They looked at each other in the darkness. He hesitated and then asked, "If I asked you to come north with me after, is this really finished, would you say?" Her breath caught sharply. "Why?" she asked. "Because I do not want you to vanish," he replied softly. "I want you to survive." She grasped his hand tightly. "Do you truly mean that?" "Every single word," he assured her. Then he did something he had never dared before. He reached up, gently touched her cheek, and kissed her, not with roughness, not as a man claiming victory, but as someone deeply thankful to have found something he never believed he deserved. When they parted, her tears were silent, and he held her close until dawn. As daylight broke, the women assembled. They were prepared not only to flee, but to stand and fight. They had been shattered before, but now they had a leader, Olivia. They watched her confidently standing beside Caleb, whose arm was still in a sling and whose hair was braided down her back, by one of the girls whispering prayers into her shoulder throughout the night. "I cannot promise we will win," she told them firmly, "but I swear I will not let them take another one of us, ever again." The women raised their fists, even those barely able to walk, and followed her. The escape started in the tunnels. Sela scouted ahead while Olivia stayed in the middle. However, their progress was cut short. The tunnel split near the exit, and there in the narrow corridor stood the man dressed in white, alone and unarmed, with a calm smile. His voice echoed as he said, "But you should have chosen the ladder." Olivia stepped forward. "You treat women as if they were mere pieces in your games. You destroy them for sport." The man blinked slowly. "No, I do not destroy them," he said, advancing. "I gather them." Then more men emerged from the shadows behind him. 10, 12, perhaps even more, all clothed identically and wearing blank expressions, weapons poised for battle. Olivia turned to Caleb, who raised his axe and charged forward without uttering a single word. The collision of metal striking bone roared like a mighty thunderclap. Caleb confronted the first attacker, shouldering his full force while his axe sliced through the narrow corridor, plunging it into utter chaos. He acted without awaiting commands or signals, fighting with the fury of a tempest unleashed. Every movement was fueled by anger, determination, and years of silent suffering. Behind him, a line of women gathered closely together. They did not shrink away. Olivia stood amidst them, barely able to keep her balance, her right arm still tightly bound, her breath shallow yet her gaze unwaveringly fixed on Caleb. Then she stepped forward and shouted, "Push!" Her voice, though cracked and worn, rang out sharply against the stone walls like a clarion call. The women advanced, not retreating. Some gripped sharpened iron bars, others clutched stones, and some held only the memory of their stolen pride. United, they surged ahead. The first guard line wavered under the onslaught of their rage. One woman leapt onto a man's back, biting fiercely into his neck. Another plunged a stick into the back of a knee. Blood stained the stone floor, yet nobody faltered. Not even Olivia. She pressed forward through the throng, catching a falling man's blade with her free arm before it could strike. A guard screamed out, but Olivia did not waver. Pain clouded her vision, yet she stood tall. She could not afford to fall. Not at this moment. Not at the crucial moment Caleb seized Olivia's wrist. "Go back," he urged. "I refuse. You will perish." Then she said, "Let it be for a cause." The ground beneath them shook violently. Explosions erupted, but there were no other footsteps. Olivia turned around, startled. Fear gripped her as she glimpsed more men not wearing guard uniforms, but soldiers instead. Lord Carson had dispatched his private army. They swarmed the tunnels like locusts, faceless, armored, and silent. The few survivors were now cornered. Caleb pushed Olivia behind him. "There are too many." The women huddled together, shielding each other with flesh and bone. They had come so far. Then a tremor unlike footsteps came. Something deeper. A wall beside the soldiers cracked, then split and crumbled. Amidst the dust, a figure stepped forward, broad and hooded, bare-chested with muscles strong as a horse. He was not alone. Soon dozens more followed, men and women dressed in rough fabric, carrying torches and crude weapons. Each bore a scarred X marked on their arms over chains. Former slaves from the mines had risen. The newcomers did not stop to speak. They crashed into the soldiers like thunder, breaking their ranks with pure force. The tunnel echoed with the battle's screams. Olivia felt Caleb's grip tighten on her hand. "Run," he commanded. They obeyed without hesitation. The deeper caverns opened into wide spaces, old train tunnels from when the mine was still active. Now they fled through darkness dampened by forgotten water and filled with the voices of the departed. Olivia held onto Caleb's hand tightly as he guided their escape, dodging decayed beams and collapsing stairways. Occasionally, another girl grabbed her arm, asking what to do. Olivia had no answers, but did her best to lead. He answered anyway. "Keep moving forward. Do not stop." Behind them, the battle raged on. The man wearing white was still alive somewhere nearby. She sensed it deep inside. They surfaced just before daybreak. The tunnel's exit opened onto the side of a rocky cliff east of the Holland estate. The wind swept across the fields. The horizon glowed crimson. They appeared in a new world. Freedom. 27 survivors in total sank down into the brush. Some cried, others laughed. Caleb stood, stained with blood, one hand resting on his knee. Olivia sat beside him. They stayed silent, not ready to speak. Suddenly, a soft voice pierced the quiet. "Is it over?" A girl, no older than 13, with cropped hair and scarred arms, asked. Olivia looked at her and whispered, "No, not over. Just beginning." They did not travel far. They established camp next to a stream. Caleb pointed out there would be shade by midday and that they would need water. He made fires and foraged for food. Olivia worked on treating wounds using the few things she recalled from her mother's nursing. For 2 days they remained hidden and recovered. Yet on the third day, smoke appeared on the horizon. Not just fire dust, but ash rising into the sky. Caleb spotted it first. "We do not have time," he said, turning to Olivia. "They will come after you again." She shook her head in refusal. He gripped her shoulder firmly. "You do not understand. You are no longer just a daughter. You have become a symbol. More will come. They will burn this land down, trying to find you. I refuse to abandon these girls. They will perish, and then I will die with them." He looked at her and took a deep breath. "Then I suppose I stay as well." She looked away, blinking quickly. "Why?" He carefully reached out and touched her chin. "Because you make me believe once more. What does it mean to be in love?" That night the riders arrived, but they did not come as invaders. They approached quietly, mounted on black horses and dressed in dark clothes, the Holland emblem displayed on their collars. Leading them was a man dressed in white who did not smile. He halted his horse 10 steps from the campfire. "Daughter of Carson," he said, "you possess something that belongs to us." Olivia rose slowly and replied, "I belong to no one." The man's lip curled in disdain. "You were wagered. I was not consulted." He glanced toward Caleb. "You believe she loves you? She is a slave, a mutt, just a toy to her." He sneered in an attempt to unsettle her. Olivia stood firm, showing no fear. "I do not care what you think. I am not addressing you." The man's tone grew colder. "I am speaking to her." He moved closer. "I know your father, Olivia. I understand what he did and how he wept when you refused the marriage. I know he begged me to fix you. He did not give you to me out of hatred. He gave you because he could not bear the sight of what he created." Olivia clenched her jaw and said firmly, "Good. Then he does not have to see me anymore." The man raised his hand and the riders drew their pistols. "Last chance," he warned. Olivia stepped forward. "Do it." He hesitated. She pulled her shawl from her shoulders, revealing a mark burned into her skin, scars from the tunnels, the fire, the lash. "You made this," she said, "so come and finish it." Silence followed. Then a gunshot cracked in the air. One of the riders flinched, not because of her, but from behind. Then another shot sounded. The man turned sharply. Figures appeared among the trees, dozens, then hundreds, farmers, ranchers, slaves, freedmen, all armed and all silent. At their center stood an old man. A man stood holding a Bible in one hand and a rifle in the other. He lifted it and spoke a single sentence. "She is not alone." The Holland riders fled, not out of fear of battle, but because for the first time they feared losing it. They disappeared into the darkness and no one pursued them. Olivia collapsed against Caleb's chest and he embraced her, whispering, "It is over." She raised her eyes and said, "No." He blinked in surprise. "We have not danced yet." Bathed in firelight with the survivors watching, she leaned in and kissed him once more. They named it the River Camp, a cluster of tents and makeshift huts now scattered across the clearing near the stream where Caleb and Olivia had led the girls after their escape. It was nothing grand, but for those who had known only chains and windowless cells, it felt like paradise. For Olivia, it seemed more like home than any parlor or ballroom she had ever known. She stirred a pot of beans while 3 of the younger girls gathered wood nearby. One shy girl, Bess, had started laughing again. Sarah could finally meet men's eyes without fear. Some still wept at night or flinched at loud voices or clung together in the lengthening shadows. But slowly they were healing as one. Olivia's arm was mending. The scratches on her face had formed scabs, yet Inside her, something deeper awakened. A part of her that once hid behind polished surfaces and tight-laced vanity had unraveled, making room for something quieter and stronger. She no longer hated herself or Silas. He remained close, neither hovering nor pressing. Just there, just there, chopping wood, repairing roofs, sitting next to her as she watched the sunset. He had lost so much, yet never voiced a single complaint, even when coughing up blood behind the shed at night, even when his shoulders shook under the unbearable burden. He refused to talk about it. Olivia noticed this, but she did not push him, not yet. He always came back to her as naturally as the moon returns with the tide. The camp had begun receiving visitors, families from nearby valleys, widows and ranchers, former slaves who brought word of uprisings in the south. People were keenly listening. Some stayed. An older man with a gray beard who had lost both sons to Holland, soldiers delivered crates of flour. A one-eyed girl arrived with a rifle and asked if she could be taught to guard the eastern hill. They were not an army, yet they no longer lived in fear. Rumors circulated that House Holland had fallen silent. Some said Lord Carson himself had become ill. Others whispered he had taken his own life. None of those tales mattered to Olivia anymore, not in the least. One night, beneath a sky bursting with stars, Caleb stood beside the riverbank, his reflection wavering on the water. Olivia found him barefoot in the grass, holding a bottle of water in one hand and clinging to silence with the other. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "I keep hearing them. The girls." "No, the ones I could not save from before." She stepped closer. "You did save them. I was not the one you failed," she said softly. Caleb turned his gaze to her, his eyes edged with quiet pain. "No, you saved yourself." She moved to stand beside him. "And you saved me afterward." He looked down. She placed her hand on his chest. I believe I was cursed," she confessed, "that I was born flawed, that my size, my face, my gentleness made me unworthy." "You are not gentle," he whispered. She smiled. "Yes, I am, but that does not mean I am fragile." He took her hand, dropped the bottle, and reached into his coat pocket. A necklace, a locket. The very one she had seen once hanging from a chain around his neck before the first night he held her. He placed it gently into her palm. She opened it and found a photo, creased and faded, of a girl smiling. "My sister," he explained before they took her. Olivia blinked back tears. "She looks like you. She was the only one who called me by my real name, not boy, not mule, but Caleb's. She would be proud of you." He said nothing at first and then admitted, "I don't know how to do this." "Love." Olivia leaned forward. "Then we will learn together." She kissed him. This time it was slow, not hurried, not desperate, just safe, filled with something both ancient and new. The very next day, 3 girls disappeared. At dawn, Sarah came running into the camp barefoot and gasping for breath. "Riders," she managed. "They took them from the creek. 2 men dressed in black." Caleb's jaw tightened. Olivia stood up. "Which direction?" "North, toward the mesa." Caleb did not hesitate. "I will go." "I'm coming too," Olivia declared. "No, you cannot." "I am not trying to stop you. I am trying to protect you." "I am not something to protect." He met her gaze and smiled. "Then let us bring them home." By midday, they found the trail. Horse tracks, boot prints, one of the girls' ribbons snagged on a branch. They rode together in silence. The wind bit at their faces. Olivia felt the burn in her cheeks and muscles from the ride, yet her gaze remained steady. Each mile was like a silent prayer, each sound of hooves a solemn vow. They arrived at the mesa just as dusk settled. Smoke billowed from a cave at its base. The entrance was guarded by 2 men clad in dark coats, weapons in hand. They showed no insignia. Mercenaries likely sent to reclaim what Holland could no longer hold by intimidation. Silas gestured for Olivia to stay back. She refused. Instead, she moved quietly around the perimeter as dusk deepened. By the moment he charged the front gate, she was already behind them. One guard quickly fell, Caleb's fist shattering his jaw with force. The other turned in surprise, only to collapse when Olivia struck him with a rock she'd picked up. They slipped inside the cave. The girls tied up but unharmed were there, their tears flowing when they spotted her. Olivia rushed forward, her hands trembling as she loosened their bonds. One whispered, "I knew you'd come." Olivia hugged her tightly, saying, "We always will." They did not return to River Camp that evening. Instead, they rested in a clearing, built a fire, and sat close beneath the stars. Caleb, Olivia, and the rescued girls. "Why are they still after us?" Sarah questioned. Caleb stared into the glowing embers. "Because their world was built on our backs, and they fear what happens once we refuse to bow." Olivia gazed up at the night sky. "We will keep moving forward." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "But we must plan on a much larger scale." At dawn, Olivia stood atop a hill as the camp woke below. Caleb approached her side. "We have the land, we have the people, yet we still need a—" In the future, she looked at him and asked, "You thinking what I am thinking?" He smirked. "No, probably not." She turned around fully. The place was a school. He blinked. For girls. She smiled. For anyone to teach them to read, to write, to speak without fear. He observed her. "You are not the same person you used to be." She shook her head. "No, and I will never go back." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a ring, not made of gold nor silver, just leather tightly wound around a stone. "I wanted to give you this on the day we escaped," he said, "but I was afraid." She smiled. "I am not afraid anymore," and he slid the ring onto her finger. The chapel was only half finished when the first snow began to fall. The girls helped with the painting. The youngest sang, and Olivia stood by the fireplace, chalk in hand, writing the motto she had chosen, "Love Not Owned." Caleb passed behind her, holding nails between his teeth. She stopped. What he laughed. "You spelled loved incorrectly." She gasped. He grinned, and she tackled him into the hay. That winter house. Holland fell apart. Carson vanished. His lands were confiscated, and the new governor, a black man from the southern provinces, wrote a letter to Olivia personally. It read simply, "Let me know what you need." By the spring, the school had 20 children. By the summer, they were constructing a second chapel. Every night, Caleb and Olivia strolled along the river, holding hands, no longer ashamed, no longer in hiding. One evening, Bess came up with a question. "Are you married?" she asked Caleb. He glanced at Olivia. She raised an eyebrow. "Well," he replied, "I guess not, yet." The girl frowned. Why did Olivia not kneel? Because love does not revolve around a dress or a ring. It is about remaining steadfast even when times become tough. And they had done exactly that. "Then you are already married," Best smiled broadly. Olivia skipped away joyfully. Caleb looked down thoughtfully. "Do you believe that is true?" Olivia nodded. "It feels that way." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Then let us keep it that way." The sun sank low behind the cottonwood trees, casting a golden glow over the chapel's whitewashed walls. Olivia stood at the doorway, her apron lightly dusted with flower petals, hands resting tenderly on her rounded belly. The girls had been squealing with excitement all morning, half because of her cooking and half because she and Caleb had at last made their commitment official, exchanging vows not before judges or nobles, but in front of the very children they had once saved. Caleb emerged from the barn, wiping sweat from his forehead. His shirt loosened at the collar, the familiar leather ring still snug around his finger. When he saw her standing there, a slow, easy smile spread across his face, like sunlight softening land previously scorched by drought. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, brushing hair from her eyes. She kicked again. He stepped closer and rested a hand gently on her belly. "She is strong like her father," he said with a low, warm chuckle. "No, like her mother," she replied softly. They lingered in that moment as the wind stirred the chapel bell. In the fields beyond, girls chased fireflies, their laughter floating on the evening air. Inside the schoolhouse, chalkboards waited patiently. On the hill, rows of vegetables sprouted from once barren soil, all of it a testament to new life born from fractured beginnings. Olivia leaned toward him. She admitted, "I used to believe that nobody would truly notice me. Not really, that I was too large, too unusual, too overwhelming." Caleb kissed her softly on the temple, assuring her, "You were never too much. The world was simply too narrow." She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." He embraced her more closely and replied, "Thank you for rescuing me." Behind them, the door slowly opened and Sarah called out, "Dinner is ready." Olivia smiled warmly and said, "Come on, husband." Caleb grinned brightly, and together they walked hand in hand into the home they had created. Not built from stone or rank, but from something infinitely stronger. Love. That was their true foundation. The end.